and welcome to the Christchurch Fox Chapel podcast. Well, it's the fastest growing, conservative, evangelical, charismatic podcast. The entire Fox Chapel area.
I think that's the most descriptive word of our podcast that we've actually ever done.
Some intriguing noises in the studio today, Ben.
Yeah. Why? What's the reasoning?
I think with noises, Hebrew word noises, it's a little bit like when you get a new car and you see, you buy a Hyundai Sonata, and then everywhere you go, you see the Hyundai Sonata. I think, I can't help but find weird Hebrew noise words in this book now.
Yeah, it's true. I'm noticing a pattern that we tend to fixate on things.
On the childish noise,
on patterns and on childish noises as well. Yeah.
We've got one here.
It's right there. I abhor, right?
Yeah, ta'ab, which is to puff disdainfully. It's a noise, and that God makes. So it's a very human sound that God's making. Just a kind of kind of a noise. In fact, I was reading in Ezekiel this morning because I'm working through Ezekiel, and there's two more there that sighing and groaning, and to sigh, to kind of huff. It literally means and to groan is
a little bit more. Is that a chet?
Yeah,
a little bit more
guttural. Nasal and guttural. Yeah. So there's evidently within Hebrew a lot of different words that people let out when they're exasperated, tired, annoyed, irritated, upset, angry, that are all very similar, kind of huffing, puffing, harumphing.
Now, just
sound words.
Just to be clear, no one knows exactly how ancient Hebrew was pronounced, right? Because the vowels are missing.
It's very difficult to write in any kind of language. Actually,
that was a good one.
Thanks.
Yeah. How do you exactly capture the intonation of things? Like apparently in Chinese, ma can mean 4 different things. It's like boy, school, mom, it's like ma, and ma.
Oh, you get this in French with coot and cou, which are neck and bottom.
Yeah.
I know this because when my mum studied French, she did French at the same time as me when I was at high school. She went back to night school, and she gave a story about how Grandad was shot in the arse during the Second World War. And caused great hilarity in the classroom because it's not even bottom; it's a slightly kind of rude word for it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
huh?
He was actually shot in the neck, just for the record.
Not a Forrest Gump.
All right, so the Lord God has sworn by Himself, declares the Lord, the God of hosts. I, the pride of Jacob. I'm just done with it.
I can just imagine kind of looking on, I think of a French guy actually automatically when I hear that.
Yeah, you should do
sound.
It's a very Gallic kind of a shrug.
Yeah,
an outrageous raspberry to the air.
Yeah. You know what I think?
Yeah. Zoot.
And I hate his strongholds.
Yeah.
So God hates pride.
God's really fed up.
Yeah,
he's done, and it's interesting because we've had this theme that's run through the book for a little while now. You talked about being long of nose as an idiom for patient.
Yeah,
and there's this sense that God's patience really is running out.
Yeah,
with these people, and God is long suffering. He's patient. He's slow to anger. He's kind. So for Him to find His patience running out is marked.
Well, I thought the quote. I forget what his name is, but I quoted him in the sermon last week that the woe oracle is that's like an advanced. It's a really aggressive kind of prophecy. It's saying listen, at this point, God he's going after individual consciences, but the nation is done for.
So we've had doom, warning, lament, and now woe.
Now, woe.
This would be the most intense of all of the oracles.
Yeah. This whole from like chapter 5 into these woe oracles is really like the heart of the book, I've heard. So like this is as intense as it gets.
Right, I think we have some heart of book stuff going on. We will get back to righteousness and justice in a few moments' time. So that seems to be a recurring theme in this part of the book. In particular, God's fed up with the injustice.
And righteousness is the moral character, and justice. I'm asking this to be corrected. And then justice is sort of the action that reflects righteousness. Yeah,
there's definitely some interplay between the words, or some overlap between the words. And, one of the difficulties we have with Old Hebrew words is that the Bible, the New Testament, written in Greek, might have the same word, the same English word, with different subtleties of meaning. And of course, then we might have our own modern take in English on that word. So like a word like justice in the Old Testament really means the rules or the law of God. It's the mishpat. So it's the right things to do. It's keeping the law.
It's the letter of the law.
In the New Testament, justice, dikaiosune, and in Greek, we're looking more at the kind of uprightness or the purity or the moral goodness of a person.
Yeah.
Or the legal declaration of their goodness.
Yeah.
So that two slightly different things. And then, of course, in American English today, we're often thinking more about equity and a fair dealing under the law.
So it's interesting how when we translate between languages and translate between cultures, we're actually sometimes modifying the underlying concepts.
A little.
And this is why it's so important to go back to the original languages.
It is.
Because it calls our own worldview into question.
Yeah, and so, we've recommended it before. Right now, I think we probably both have very similar things open on our screen. I have an ESV study Bible on my screen, and if I hover my mouse over particular words, it will just pop up with the Hebrew word, which is written in squiggles, but underneath the squiggles it says how to say it in English, and then it tells you what it means, what its primary meaning is, secondary meaning if there is one, maybe a tertiary meaning, and then it gives a list of all the examples of where that word is used in Scripture and how it's been translated in tradition.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of powerful information without needing to be a scholar in a particular language.
Yeah.
You can actually you could use this without any knowledge of Hebrew and get a lot out of it.
Yeah, you really could.
And it's like $50 or whatever.
Yeah.
So I recommend it highly.
If you're going to write like an authoritative book using your findings, maybe be careful. But like if you're just trying to understand the Bible better, it's really handy.
It is really handy. It is really, really good. So and I think as you're pointing out that righteousness and justice as a pairing of words, it does give you some depth and some color.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about the law in an abstract sense, doing what God says, but we're also talking about the practical outworking of that law. And when a king is righteous and just, you have godly rule. You have the practical goodness of being well governed.
Yeah.
So all of that's going on there. There's the actual law, because the actual law of God isn't just a bunch of rules. It's very practical. So there are technical laws, but there are also very practical laws. Hebrew law, the law of God in the Old Testament, there's workplace regulations about working at height. There's food regulations about food hygiene. There's health regulations about disease.
Yeah, there's discussions about like liability and all that kind of stuff.
Liability. There's commercial rules about fair dealing in the marketplace. Yeah. There's property legislation about moving of boundaries or selling and buying properties.
Yep.
There's a lot of what we would call regulation.
Yeah, but what we find is that God's not just like in a broad sense just sort of throwing his people down in the promised land and saying, well, figure it out. But actually this is a very highly developed detail-oriented.
Yeah, if someone's there's due process. If someone's accused under the law, well, there's mechanisms for calling witnesses and determining whether the person did a thing or not. So there's due process, there's workplace, health, regulations, all that sort of thing goes on. And therefore, if you keep the law, the justice,
you're
going to get righteousness. You're going to get upright, fair dealings and good times and equitable life and a stable economy and stable social system.
That makes sense.
Because so you do have very, if you like, technical rules about exactly how to slaughter an animal or build a room. So, but you have very practical rules.
So justice, mishpat, will keep you within the right kind of moral matrix.
Yeah, life will be good. Life will be good. Not just because you're right with God, and when you're right with God, things work out, but because also your practical living is going to look godly. So it's both of those things.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, so justice and righteousness are going to be coming up in verse 12 here, but we're in verse 8.
Yep.
God abhors the pride of Jacob, hates his strongholds, and I will deliver the city up and all that is in it, so they will be overthrown. Yeah,
we're done. And it's funny because deliver is usually a very positive word, isn't it? You delivered from slavery or delivered from Egypt. Mm-hmm. The God is the strong deliverer.
Yeah.
And yet here, the deliverer is really a handing over away. To close or close out or close up.
He can deliver any way he wants.
Yeah. He's going to shut you up or shut you out. You're going to be locked out of the city.
Yeah. Interesting.
And city is often the good thing, right? City is the place of regulation. It's the place of order and protection. There's the strongholds. There's the walls. It's the place where you're safe from harm. There aren't jackals and wolves like in the wilderness.
Yeah.
There aren't auguries of death like an owl.
It's not for nothing that auguries of death. It's not for nothing that Revelation depicts not a garden but a city.
Intriguing, isn't it? Yeah.
That's the ordered human existence.
Whereas Jesus is cast out into the wilderness at the beginning of his public ministry.
Yeah.
The Israelites have wandered through the wilderness.
Yeah.
So there've been times of, the Dust Bowl dance.
Yeah.
Many times.
City and wilderness are sort of juxtaposed.
And out of the city, off you go. So there's it's a disaster. The strongholds.
The order is being undone. It's being decreated in a sense.
No, it's not. And then, of course, we've had this before in the book. We have a big example, and then we move down to a more granular scale. So like you've got your atoms, and you've got your molecules, you've got your atoms, and then you've got your electrons or whatever. Well, things get smaller and smaller. So we move from the big city down to individual houses. We have big houses, and then we have little houses. So it's getting more and more and more individual, more granular as we go.
We had the great houses, right? Was that in chapter 3 or 4?
Yeah, and they come back 4. In verse 11. The great house will be struck down into fragments and the little house into bits. So city, big house, little house.
And the bits. Bits of little house.
It says bits. Yeah, bits of little house. I don't know. We can use a thing.
So
it means a fissure or a breach or a cleft. So just smashed up.
So if verse 9, if 10 men remain in one house, they shall die.
Yep. Big house. I mean, 10 a lot of... Now, I mean, to people like me that have the entire youth group in their house morning, noon and night, that doesn't seem so much. And actually often they're not in the house. They open all the doors and they wander in and out of the building.
Yeah. They leave the doors open.
They do.
I was hoping my kids would stop doing that eventually, but yeah.
No, children love doors, don't they?
Yeah, they love to stand in them and they love to leave them open. Good. If 10 men remain in a house, they shall die.
Which is a massive house. A massive house. That's a mansion. In the ancient Near East, if your house could just comfortably house 10 men.
That's huge.
Plus women, plus children.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a palace.
Yeah. And when one's relative, the one who anoints him for burial, shall take him up to bring the bones out of the house and shall say to him, who is in the innermost parts of the house, is there still anyone with you? He shall say, no. And he shall say, silence. We must not mention the name of the Lord.
I mean, the meaning of this is a bit obscure. According to the scholars, the meaning of this is obscure. So I think it's obscure. They think it's obscure. What it means is no one really, really gets it. But I can tell you the image that springs to mind. There's a poem called The Listeners. Is there anybody there? And there's this host of phantom listeners who are just sort of like ghosts in an old haunted house. This man's like banging on the door. Is anybody there? And no one listens. And I sort of picture this idea of a faded glory, old mansion, dusty, like a disused shopping mall or something. If you've seen those pictures, have you seen those ones like where weeds have grown through a mall or whatever?
I don't need to see the pictures. I can just go to the mills.
It's
right there.
No, yeah, good point. Well made. Picture that. Picture them. Are there any stores left?
There's Macy's still.
Macy's, and then there's like the Salt Rock Candle store or whatever.
Okay, so apparently people are considering like a boycott of the mills because the company that like owns the land and runs the stuff like refuses to pave the roads.
Have you seen the potholes? Are horrific.
Oh, they're awful. It is like a third world country.
Yeah, well,
I don't know what
so I read that the 3 townships there had a deal with the mills that the mills would effectively pay for the roads and stuff.
Oh.
And the mills isn't paying its way because it's
bankrupt.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty desperate.
Yeah, well, all these companies that rely on their business, Walmart and all that, they're going to be Aldi. They're going to be in trouble. Lowe's.
Yeah. The bit that's successful. Yeah.
Somebody's got to pick up the bill.
Well, they just put cones out now. They're like that kind of sign of defeat.
That is, it'll be truly Pittsburgh when we get to a chair, a metal folding chair is just stuck out there.
Well, so I picture something like that, this big thing that was prosperous and full of hope and full of life and full of people is now, there's just bones rattling around in there, like a dusty mansion. Like someone's dead in there. And I mean, if there's bones coming out, they've been dead a long time. So the Lord of the Manor, this is my picture, this is not my translation, it's just what comes to mind. The Lord of the Manor is kind of has just died to bones on the Persian carpet in this dusty old mansion, and the sun has come up and gone down every day, and the dust is gathering on the books, and it's just empty.
Yeah.
The palace has become a mausoleum.
Oh, you know what? It just dawned on me. You have, I like that image. So you have the city delivered up. So if you have 10 people in one house, why would they die? Well, there are invaders coming, right?
Yeah.
So you can hide in the house, but you're still going to die. And then one's relative who anoints him for burial shall take him up to bring the bones out of the house and shall say to him who is in the innermost parts of the house, is there still anyone with you? He shall say no. Wait, but isn't the guy in the house dead?
Yeah. It's comic. It's tragic. You're just going to talk to these bones, and the bones are going to say, "No, there's no one else here. I'm the last."
Is this like a kind of a dark joke?
Yes.
Interesting.
I think it is. But then you get this, feels like superstition kind of builds at the end of verse 10, silence, we must not mention the name of the Lord, as though just saying Yahweh would kill you.
Because he's brought destruction on them.
Right, so we didn't even talk about him.
So we have total annihilation.
Like Beetlejuice or something. You just don't mention it.
Don't mention Beetlejuice.
Well, not a third time, please. Yeah.
What about Beetlejuice?
Oh! Yeah.
We were talking about this before. We intentionally step on every superstition. We walk under ladders.
We do.
We have to. Because Christ is Lord. And the dark powers have nothing. Anyways, so so you have this scene of total death and fear because of what God has done. It seems like that's what I'm getting out of verses 9 and 10.
Fear. You've got hatred, first of all. God's hatred of what they're all about.
Yeah.
Yes. And then this faded glory, death. And then this fear and superstition about God.
Yeah.
And then absurdity. Or at least a revelation of the total absurdity of their behavior. So verse 11, the Lord commands, the great house should be struck down, so all this stuff's going to happen. Verse 12, an argument again from reason like we've had before. Do horses run on rocks? Does one plow there with oxen? No, that you don't. You don't
plow rocks.
You don't plow rocks. You don't try and plant seed on a cliff face. You don't run horses over jagged rocks because you will wreck the horse.
Okay.
So here's an example of some stupid things that you'd be stupid to do, and no one would be so stupid as just do a stupid thing. Right?
Yeah.
That's the point.
Uh-huh.
So we've got hate, then we've got decay, then we've got fear, and now we've got stupidity. And no one would be so stupid as to be stupid, would they? But you have.
But you've taken justice and turned it into poison.
Yeah.
So just as rocks are not a fitting use for horses or plowing, so also poison is not a fit, like your use of justice is not a fit place for real justice.
Yeah, I mean, if you were trying to have growth and goodness, you'd find some fertile land in the Fertile Crescent, as you pointed out.
Oh, yeah.
Like we've got cows of Bashan, we've got all of these places. Physically, thinking agriculturally for a moment, because Amos is a farmer, there are all these places that yield crops well.
Fecund.
So you would not, for example, drive all your cattle and all of your flocks and ride all of your horses from the Fertile Crescent all the way up to, say, for example, Mount Ebal, where Baal is worshipped. You wouldn't take your stuff into the deserts of Moab.
Yeah.
Right, you wouldn't do that. That'd be stupid. So in the same way that you would be utterly moronic to take all of your plowing equipment and start trying to drive seeds into cliff face.
Yeah.
In the same way, you'd be utterly moronic to take something as beautiful and sweet and life-giving as justice and turn it into poison.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And remember, we think justice and righteousness operate as a pair in this. So the fruit of righteousness into wormwood, which, as we've seen before, is a kind of bitter herb.
So there's a distorting of due process of justice.
Take something sweet and life-giving, make it poisonous. Take something fruitful and sweet and make it bitter.
There's a denial of truth in all of this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That
you
makes
had
sense.
you had a system that was fertile. Mm-hmm. You had a system that was primed to provide you with sweetness and plenty and goodness and prosperity, and you've taken all of these advantages and you've turned it upside down, and that is as stupid as trying to plant all of your crops on the rocks. I think is the point.
Okay.
So stupidity.
Got it.
And as we've seen, justice, the mishpat, we've got the whole law there. So we've got the sacrificial system, which we find in Leviticus 1 through 5, which is how you obtain and maintain your relationship with God.
Yeah.
In a very technical sense. And then we've got the full law, not just the 10 Commandments, but all of the laws that regulate all of the facets of life, down to the nature of a parapet when working at height, in order to prevent accident from falls.
So there was a traditional distinction of the moral law, the ceremonial law, and the civic law.
Right.
And justice and righteousness encompass all of those.
I think
they're all unity.
I think you can make that argument. Yeah, at least that's what we're saying.
Yeah. No, I think I've heard that from many others as well.
Okay.
You can't just compartmentalize parts of the law off.
So you've lost the spiritual benefits of being the law keepers, which is to say your relationship with God.
Yeah.
And you've lost the practical blessings, because God doesn't give you ideas just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
There are good reasons. You see this in cultures that are vestigially Christian. There are still good things that go on, that non-believers are benefiting from Judeo-Christian concepts.
Yes.
Right? So that's
the story of Christendom.
It is the story of Christendom, Tom. That's right, Tom.
It's important.
It's important, Dominic. Yeah.
I love that none of our listeners know what we're talking about.
Oh, no, everyone listens to The Rest is History.
Yeah. If they don't, they should.
It's the most listened to podcast after this one, according to our data.
Really?
No, I mean in the world. I don't mean we get more listeners than The Rest is History. I mean that most of our listeners listen to that too.
Oh, really? Wow. It was Tucker Carlson for a while.
Yeah.
I'm glad this changed.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. Anyways, okay. You who rejoice in Lo-Debar. What's Lo-Debar? Lo-Debar.
Oh, it's a place, but it means nothingness.
You rejoice in nothingness.
Well, it's an actual place, but it's called, but it means nothingness.
I think that Amos would have been a really interesting guy to hang out with.
It would.
Like, I can't say that like he would be an easy guy to hang out with.
Yeah.
But I think I get the sense that he's almost sort of was like a comedian a little bit. Like there's so much humor, but really dark humor packed throughout this whole thing. It's extremely sarcastic.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think actually what's kind of funny is that Karnaim, it means horn or power.
You who rejoice in Lodabar, who say, have we not by our own strength captured Karnaim, horn, power for ourselves?
Those of you who live in nothingness, do not think that you've obtained all the power. I think is the gist of the joke. I mean, the joke makes more sense to them because they're hearing the words with their actual meanings.
Yeah.
And we have towns that have funny names, right? Mm-hmm. Lots of them. There's a town down south called Amos. I think that's a very funny name for a town.
Really?
Yeah.
That is.
So they're hearing that in their native language, and although it's a known city, the city they're also going to be it's going to fire off associations with nothingness or associations with power by virtue of what the root word behind it means. Wordplay again,
which the Hebrews loved. So he's saying you turn justice into poison and you're stupid for it, and the fruit of righteousness into wormwood. You made righteousness bitter, and just goes to show your stupidity. Oh, you who rejoice in the nothing and have said, look, by our own strength, we captured strength for ourselves.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, okay, that in God's opinion of all this is...
Yeah.
Yeah, it is funny.
Like we would go like, ugh, wouldn't we? A noise would come out. And this is the thing, when you're frustrated with someone's just blockheadedness, often it is a noise that comes out and not a word. When you're done with all the sophisticated arguments, it can often just be a kind of a sound.
Yeah.
And in a debate, you would say, well, that's when you lost. But we're not in a debate.
No.
We're before the sovereign of the universe.
And also we're in an ancient Middle Eastern culture where the more expressive you are, the more that's a sign of truthfulness. Yeah,
there've been studies, at least in the English court system, actually about this, because England is a country, or Great Britain, United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland is a country that has a lot of immigrants from different cultures that were invited to come to the UK in the 60s. What this brought into the legal system when crimes were tried were all sorts of cultural behaviours that are very different from British culture. So, great example, right? A white English defendant will look at the judge in the eye, right, and show his hands, palms up. And this is going to demonstrate to them, say, a magistrate, which is a lower court, you're judicially examined, there's no jury, that will show to the magistrate, well, you're an honest broker. You're being honest, right? You would not look at someone in the eye and show them your hands out, and unless you were being really honest.
Yeah.
But many cultures, that would be grossly disrespectful to an authority figure. And you would demonstrate your sincerity by looking at the ground, avoiding their gaze, clenching your fists, that kind of a thing. And or by flailing around. By waving your arms in the air and yelling.
Yeah.
And so I tell you what, if you come into a 1960s courtroom and you shuffle around and mutter and look at the ground, or you shake your fist at the judge and scream, you're going to get banged up. And so a lot of research went into this kind of cultural attitudes to demonstrating sincerity.
Fascinating.
Very helpful within the criminal law. And you could say that you've got something like that going on here with a Hebraic idiom. Calling someone stupid is kind of part of it. I mean, Jesus actually says, you don't call someone stupid. He's challenging the culture. If you say to your brother, fool, you'll be in danger of the fire of hell.
Fascinating.
So it means it was very common to be called out for your stupidity.
Yeah.
And God, of course, is entitled to do that.
Yeah, he's God.
And he needs to, because they think they're oh so smart.
Yeah, and if God calls you stupid, that means that you're legitimately stupid.
You are actually, you've been adjudged by the sovereign of the universe to be stupid.
You're not being misrepresented.
There's no coming back from that.
No, there's no coming back
The
from
data
that.
doesn't lie. It's like Formula One. It's like, if this is what the brake trace says, it says it, and there's no hiding.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can't. Behold. Well, we're gearing up for Formula One season again, so the metaphors will be back.
Oh, good.
Behold. We love this word, don't we, on that podcast, Ben?
Behold. Behold.
Slow down, zoom in, take careful notes.
Look.
Look you.
I will raise up against you a nation, O house of Israel, declares the Lord.
I feel that he said this before. I love that he goes, no, listen, I've got shock news for you. Wait till you get a load of this. I'm going to raise up a nation. Like, really?
Yeah, you think so?
As a dispassionate observer of the text, I feel that we've heard this before.
Yeah, but once is not enough, right? Once does not signify enough.
Evidently not.
Enough emphasis. So, and declare, O house of Israel, declares the Lord, the God of armies.
Well, this is the alarming thing here. This declaration of the sovereign by the sovereign, with reference to his own titles and names, it's like in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf draws himself to his full height. We're to take note here.
Yes,
the serious word. He's saying, by my name,
by my authority and my character,
by my authority and character, God of hosts. Most Lord of hosts is the most common title for God in the Bible.
Yeah.
The angel armies, the company of heaven.
Yeah. I actually like the CSB. It's a different translation.
What does it say?
It always says God, the Lord of armies. It doesn't say Lord of hosts because people don't often know what that means. So it always translates it Lord of armies.
Yeah. A mass of persons. A spada. Spada, a mass of persons and figuratively things, organized for a war, by implication a campaign, literally or figuratively, specifically hardship, worship, appointed times, armies, battles, companies, services, soldiers, and warfare. So that means a lot of things.
Yeah.
Sun, moon, stars, and the whole of creation, and angels. And an organized army. So, the God of big stuff.
God of big things. Ultimate power.
The God of ultimate power declares the house of Israel, I'm going to raise up against you a nation. Now, this is difficult, isn't it? Because the ancients understood that when they went into battle, their gods went into battle also.
Yeah.
There's a fascinating carving on one of the pyramids, just looking at this morning, of two gods. The Egyptian gods, how they were often depicted as huge.
Yeah.
And then beneath the two gods are facing each other, if you like chess players would face each other.
Uh-huh.
And the two gods are actually shaking hands or arm wrestling with one arm. And with the other arms, they have little strings and they're like marionettes. And beneath them are big people, probably the leaders of the nations. Uh-huh. And beneath the big people are little people, running around and fighting on a battlefield with weapons and chariots and horses.
Oh.
And so the Egyptians were depicting there this idea that you've got the actual men and chariots in the army, fighting under the command of these big men, which would be the pharaoh or the whatever. And the pharaoh himself is on strings as if a marionette being manipulated by this god who sits above them all unseen on a different plane. And we're getting a glimpse into Egyptian cosmology in this carving. Well, the ancients were often very comfortable with this idea that whatever was taking place on a physical battlefield was merely an earthly revelation of a much bigger cosmic battle going on in the unseen realm.
Well, you could argue, even in our culture today, that the things that govern our leaders are often ideologies that form and shape us. Mm-hmm. And what's behind an ideology? Well, there perhaps is spiritual reality underneath ideology.
Fascinating.
Which is why Christians can never be beholden to an ideology. We always have to have because we worship the one true God. God is, what is our ideology? Like God. And we always have to be repenting of our other ideologies, not to let those other gods control us like marionette puppets.
And the difficulty for them there is that when God says, I will raise up for against you a nation, they get a glimpse, the curtain gets peeled back a little bit, and they get a glimpse of the other realm, and they see that whoever it is that's winning this cosmic battle is against them. They're on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Which means they must have a different God.
Huh.
They think that they're on Yahweh's side, but they're not on Yahweh's side. Yahweh's against them.
They're in fact.
They're doomed.
They've gone over.
They're doomed because Yahweh is more powerful.
Yeah.
So they have a different God. And
Jesus tells that to the Pharisees.
your father, the father...
Yeah,
is Satan.
He says your father's the devil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll raise up against you a nation, and they shall oppress you from Lebo Hamath to the brook of the Arabah. Right. Well, we all know what that means.
Well, not really, but the stuff gets chucked in it, doesn't it? Doesn't a lot of stuff get chucked in the brook? Aren't a lot of gods just thrown in that sometimes?
Lebo Hamath was in the far north, in the valley between Lebanon and the anti-Lebanon mountains, so north of Israel. The brook of the Arabah is the valley in the far south between the Dead Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba.
So you're going to be oppressed everywhere, from the north to the south.
North
Total
to south.
oppression.
And the cities that were destroyed in chapter 6, verse 2, go from north to south as well.
Right.
Up in Syria, down to the south, the Philistines area, Gath. So God is doing this. He often does this from north to south, complete.
You know, old Mother Hubbard has come up with the goods right here. For anybody that's been questioning the wisdom behind our sermon series bulletin cover, where do you get these images from? And, it's a question we've asked ourselves sometimes.
Yes.
This is old Mother Hubbard speaking, Israel's brief boasting in military success is utterly swamped by the broad tidal wave of invasion that will flood the entire country from its northernmost point of influence at the edge of the territory controlled by Hamath down to the southern boundaries marked by one of the brooks.
Brilliant. The gathering storm.
It's a gathering storm, Dominic. We like a gathering storm on this podcast, don't we?
Yeah, we do like a gathering storm.
That's it. So we've got hatred, we've got faded glory or decay or rot or whatever, superstition, fear. We've got stupidity, quite a lot of that. We've got nothingness and power, thinking you're one and the other. And then we've got total destruction and death again at the end.
Sundry forms of death.
Sundry forms of death. I do feel that sort of our forebears pre-First World War would have been much more comfortable with this language because they heard it all the time in what many of our listeners will know as Rite One. It's actually the 1662 prayer book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Diverse diseases and sundry forms of death.
Yes.
Oh. Yeah, it's not a pretty sight, is it? Before we finish, Ben, where's the hope in all of this?
Yes. All
right.
I'll let you answer.
Well, I've got a leg up maybe because
you do.
Because I had a quick read already. So verse 8, the Lord God has sworn by himself, declares the Lord, the God of hosts. A lot of God stuff in verse 8.
Yeah.
And so we've got Lord God, that's, Adonai, we've got Elohim, we've got Yahweh, we've got the God of hosts. So we've got pretty much all the good things you can say about God are said right here.
Yeah.
And God says, I've sworn by myself.
Yeah.
And this is an encouragement because whenever you see the word Lord, L-O-R-D, capital letters, that's the English translators giving you a nod to the fact that the actual name of God, the personal name of God, is being employed in the original text.
Yeah.
And the personal name of God, the covenant name of God, would always be a sermon in a word that reminded the readers or listeners instantaneously of his covenant promises to bless and protect.
I am who I am. I'm the one who will be with you. Yeah, that's the meaning of Yahweh or Yahweh or however you pronounce it.
And we get that in the burning bush.
Yeah.
You know, who are you? Who shall I say has sent me?
I am.
Yeah. God has been revealing himself as the rescuer, the deliverer of his people. Mm-hmm. His sovereign promises will never be broken.
Yeah.
So Israel might be hanging on by a thread. Well, Israel might be cut off, but big Israel and Judah, the people of God, the full people of God, are hanging on by a thread. A remnant will at least survive this horror because God's promised, and he won't break that promise. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe there's the hope that they are being judged, but the story is not ending.
I think that's precisely it, that this catastrophe comes because of their disobedience, and yet God's faithfulness to his promise continued. I mean, if you track it over the course of the next 700-800 years, right? The Assyrians, we know, came and conquered Israel in 722 BC, right? So within like 50, 60 years of this being delivered, that happened. Yeah. And then they were essentially annihilated as a people, but God continued to be faithful to his promises, and the people came specifically from Judah, came back out of, that's Ezra and Nehemiah, those books. They came back out of exile, but they still weren't really quite home, and were waiting for a Messiah who would really bring them out of the exile that they'd gotten themselves into. In
all ways, not just in terms of a geopolitical exile, but a spiritual exile.
Yeah. And a representative to actually be the faithful Israelite, to embody justice and righteousness,
to do
in the way
and
that
be
they were
what they were
to.
not.
Yeah. And that's Jesus.
And that is Jesus. And so you have Jesus appearing in weakness and demonstrating strength in weakness, or power in weakness and vulnerability, the opposite of them.
Yeah.
Instead of going to a nothing and thinking how powerful it is, he's everything, and he makes himself weak.
And I think for us, pride is such a deeply rooted, I've heard it said that pride and unbelief are kind of correlates, right? Like, and they're sort of the source of all sin, right? Pride and unbelief. I can do it myself because I don't trust God to do it. And, we often tend to think that we need to establish some kind of security for ourselves, whether it's through our jobs or manipulating our relationships,
for sure.
Any number of things, through our money. But God has created a better way, and we don't have to keep being slaves to things that are not God's. All right, let's get these.
They agree.
I was worried it was going to be
That's how it ends. That would make this podcast a chiasm.
We can edit that in post-production.
Well, this has been a podcast of Christ Church Fox Chapel. Apart from the raspberry bit, that was Ascension.
Yeah.
We're so grateful that you would listen. And thanks for stopping by.
Stay classy.
But mostly, thanks for stopping by.
Stay classy.